All right. Hey, how's everyone doing today? Good. It's kind of nice to be in a room that's warm. So I do hear that it is going to warm up this week, so that's good because otherwise we're going to freeze here the whole time. But my name is Phil, and I live in Nashville, Tennessee. Let's see if this thing works, hopefully. This is my family. My wife's name is Kyrie. Oddly enough, she didn't become a Christian until she was in high school. Her parents named her Kyrie because of Mr. Mister. They weren't Christian whatsoever. And they said, that's a cool name. We should just name her Kyrie, and even though we have no idea what it means. So she became a Christian later on. High school girl dragged her to youth group, and we met in 2008. So we've been married 10 years. So 2 boys, Porter and Briggs. I'm feeling kind of restless right now because I said we're from Nashville, and right now they're going through tornado warnings and watches. And the last time we had that happen, we had a tornado hit our house, come close to our house by a mile. So if all of a sudden she calls, you know why. And so we'll figure it out from there. East Nashville. So we live 10 minutes from the city. So I'll show you a little bit more about East Nashville because that kind of goes into some of the stuff.
Up in Gallatin area.
Okay, yeah. It's everyone's moving there, especially everyone from California. So yeah, that's what everyone's feeling like. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, yep, exactly. I am the director alongside my wife for 1,000 Young Leaders, and we are with PLI Leadership. PLI is what we do is we train and invest in multiplying missional leaders. So what I do specifically for 1,000 Young Leaders, and I won't go into the specifics that much, but we train Christian young adults through digital training, helping them understand their passion and context. So for today, I'm going to be sharing and introducing some tools that we use that really helps with more engagement. So that's what we'll be getting into, some of those things, logistics. I am not always the greatest conference person. I don't know if you guys would resonate with that. And what I mean by that is sometimes I get fire hosed with information, and it's like, great, how do I put that into practice? So my hope is I'm going to give you some tools today, and you're free to use them however you would like to be able to use them. And it may be a blessing for you, and just some outcomes of what we've learned that work in terms of how we engage with young leaders when it comes to in-person, streaming, and beyond. So, like I said, we live in East Nashville. Has anyone been to Nashville recently? Okay, what do you guys think? You like it? Good times? Okay. Yeah, Music City. My street. Everyone who lives on my street, it's very highly gentrified, and now everyone that lives there is involved in the music industry except me and my wife. So it's pretty wild. I have no musical talent whatsoever, but it is a fun place to be. Tennessee, the best way to describe it, it is a very red state, but East Nashville, it is the highest density of the LGBT community. We have a thing called Tomato Fest that is a huge thing in Nashville. They chose tomatoes because tomato is not a fruit or vegetable. It doesn't belong. It's weird. So everyone says stay weird in Nashville, which it is really weird. And it's really interesting. We also have the only one that has a robot parade every year. Again, we're weird. And other things to pay attention, we don't have many local churches. And that was loud. So when a local church closes down, they either demolish the building because everyone is building and moving there, or they change some of these churches into boutique hotels. So there's like not that many churches that are there. We do love Dolly Parton, and like I said, we're very highly gentrified. In my neighborhood, it looks a lot like this, where you get these older houses that have been there for 40 years and just building 2 houses on one property. It's kind of wild. So gentrification is a real thing that we're experiencing as a community together. But that's a little bit about my context and what we do and how we serve, and just wanted to be able to share that with you. Like I said, director of 1,000 Young Leaders alongside my wife, Kyrie. And we do a lot of digital training. And so it's funny, before the pandemic we were doing Zoom, and then once the pandemic happened, everyone knows how to do Zoom. So a lot of the things and training that we do is virtual through Zoom. And we do a lot of asynchronous learning through a digital platform. And we offer leadership cohorts for a lot of these Christian young adults all over the nation. So I'm the co-director there. And you guys also have the pleasure to be with our executive director, Jock Ficken. He's in the back. He is our leader for PLI leadership. Some of you all know Jock. Jock, thanks for hanging out with us today. And as we go through some of these tools. Okay, so here's my hope for today. Like I said, I'm not a huge conference person because if it's just me speaking the whole time, where's the learning going to happen? So the hope is that what we're going to be experiencing is going to be interactive and imaginative, and it's going to create initiative in terms of engagement with your leaders within your congregation. Yes, specifically we do a lot of stuff with 1,000 young leaders and Christian young adults, but these tools, concepts, and things that we're going to do together can be used with all of your leaders. So we want you to be able to be blessed by this, and you're going to have some conversations. So it's not just going to be me talking the whole time. It's also going to be us collaborative and collective group just working through some of these tools and things that we want to be able to share with you. Okay. You know how like everyone's talking about the AI and robots are taking over the world, right? Which is true. Does anyone like do that whole chat GPT thing? Pretty wild. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, like now you have AI that's writing like books and monologues and all these different things, and yes, like Terminator is real, right? Like things are happening. But like what's even crazier, and why I say goldfish, is the attention span for us now is now, and this was a study done by Microsoft, and this was 2020, is at 8.25 seconds. That is 3/4 of a second shorter than the attention span of a goldfish. Right? And so I know that you guys are here because it's just like, how do we engage in terms of how we are doing streaming, how we are engaging with our community and our church. And here's the thing, I'm not going to go specifically into like what kind of videos you need to make. That's not the point here, but it's just to let you all know the reality that we have people and leaders within our congregation that are having a hard time engaging with anything, right? Goldfish are beating us out. So put that in perspective, give yourself some grace. Just wanted to be able to share that with you. And then, interesting enough, right? Matthew 14, always love this story. Jesus comes out to the waters. Who is this? It looks like a ghost. Peter asks Jesus, if it is you, Lord, have me come out there and see you. And you guys know what happens in the particular part of the story. But context is everything, right? Right before this, Jesus fed 5,000 people. They saw this massive miracle happen, right? Which obviously they should trust that Jesus, the Savior, the Messiah, the miracle worker, is going to be able to do it and is capable of doing anything. And here you have Peter himself wanting to come out to Jesus. He takes a couple steps, all good, and then he starts sinking, cries for help, and Jesus graciously lifts him up. But the reason why I'm sharing that story with you today is the discipleship process with Jesus was not just about teaching and having them sit at the rabbi's feet, but there was a lot of experiencing that happened. So from feeding the 5,000 and even seeing his disciples fail like Peter, we can see this all over the scriptures where we see the disciples learning and interacting that is beyond just teaching, okay? And so what I mean by that, and what I hope to have you spark some of your imagination, is a lot of times our churches, they can be more like teaching centers, right? We have great sound doctrine. I mean, you're going to hear that from many different people in conversations with a lot of your colleagues out there. But my suggestion to you all is we have great training centers and even teaching on Sunday mornings. But we have great teaching centers, but we don't necessarily have the greatest training centers, all right? And what I mean by that is this. Teaching centers, this is Dave, by the way. I put Dave up there because I think he's a great teacher, right? And so he's got the gift of teaching. And what I mean by this is when you need both, by the way. You still need sound doctrine. You still need great teaching, right, in order to disciple. But we also need to be able to train alongside the people and the leaders that we're discipling. So Teaching centers, they can be informative. Training centers, we believe they can also be transformative, right? When you actually get some people working through some of these things and writing some of these things down, there's going to be more breakthrough that way. Teaching centers tend to be more of like that instant type of feeling, where training centers, the disciple making is going to be more gradual, all right? Teaching centers, you're going to have more of a student culture, where I would say within training centers, it's going to be more of a discipleship culture, all right? Teaching centers, lectures, right? Sermons, what that looks like. Training centers, it's going to be more of like a lab, all right? You get where I'm going. Training centers, we have a knowledge gap. Teaching centers, we have a knowledge gap. Training centers, we have more of a behavioral gap. Teaching centers, more of a tell. Training centers are going to be more show. And then teaching center, deeper knowledge. Training center, wider influence. So whether you agree with that or not, that's not what I'm trying to get at. My hope is that this is going to spark more of that imaginative way and creative, where we can start asking questions with our leaders within our congregations, like how can we also create more of a training center culture, where we are walking alongside our leaders and giving them tools and resources to wrestle with things. And sometimes they're going to fail, just like what we see with Peter, and that's okay. And we want to be able to celebrate those things as well. So I want you to start thinking, what is my church, what is my school, what does my context look like? Is it more of a teaching center where everyone's just listening to you as the leader, or are you cultivating and creating this type of training center? All right. Oh, last one. Teaching center raises awareness, and training center raises ownership. All right. Okay, so this is where we're going to start getting interactive. All right, we're going to start working through some of the tools that we use for PLI, for 1,000 Young Leaders, and some of these tools have really helped us give some of our participants and leaders greater clarity of many different things. This particular one right now is called Story Through Hinge Moments. A lot of times when we're interacting with people that we're doing training, they're saying, I don't know how to share the gospel. And, that's the thing that we want to walk alongside our people, our leaders, of what that looks like when that gospel opportunity happens. I think where people also struggle is they're having a hard time identifying their story and how that aligns with the gospel. All right? So let me explain. This is where this is going to be interactive. So if you have your notepad and your phone, I want you to pull that out right now. And what I want you to do is I want you to be able to list your top 10 high points. All right? Your top 10 high points in your lifespan. This could be birth all the way to right now. All right? And I want you to share some of those things of those high moments that have happened in your life. And with that being said, I want you to list your top 10 hard times. All right? What are some of those moments that have been very difficult? I'll give you some examples of what that looked like. Some of my high points, so when I got married, when I had my first kid, when I had a particular job opportunity. A hard time example would be when I was in high school. My family knew about this, but it was never talked about. My cousin was gay, and no one wanted to actually talk about the issue. And what I learned from that particular hard point is that, well, my family doesn't like to talk about hard things. And so that was like a hard moment in my life. So normally when we do something like this, I would give a lot of time, but we only do have 90 minutes, and we're going to be moving on to see more people in our next session. So I want you to just list some of those things, okay? Think about those things, all right? And then once we get to those things that you're listing down, there is going to be what we like to call is a lifeline tool. And then from that moment, with those hard times those high points and hard times, I want you to rank those particular things within your story, okay? So I gave you the example when I was in high school. Like I said, my cousin came out he was gay. My family did not want to talk about it. So I listed that as a -8 moment in my life. That's where I weighted that, right? It doesn't necessarily mean there wasn't growth that happened from my life, but that was just a hard moment, so I realized that was it. When I got married, +10, right? I better say that, right? Or else you're going to tell Kyrie, and that would be bad. And so I'm listing those things, and I'm writing those things on my Lifeline tool. So what I want you to do right now, you have those things. I want you to just start jotting down some of those high points and hard times. And, hey Ross. Take some time to do that. And then what we're going to do is if you feel comfortable, if there's a neighbor, maybe just share some of those things with your neighbor or someone that you know here. And if you don't feel comfortable, that's okay. I just want you to be able to use this Lifeline tool right now, write some of those things down, take a moment. I'm going to, again, working through this really fast. I'm going to only give you 5 minutes. Normally I give people a whole lot more time. All right, so why don't you go ahead and do that. If you have any questions, I'm here. But why don't you start writing those things down right now. You can weight any of these things however you'd like. This is your story, right? This is the things that you experience. So if there's a lot of +10s or -10s, just write it down and just weight those things, whatever works best for you. As you're writing these things down, what are some patterns that you see? Anything stand out as you are just working through your timeline and your story? Are there words that come to mind of how God was moving and working through your story in these moments? obviously right now this is something that's personal that you're doing, right? And we're talking about engaging with our leadership, right? But oftentimes, as leaders, how often do we actually know the stories of the people within our congregations, within our schools? Have you had conversations with people where you know the reality of where they've been and how hard it's been, and where there might be a death in the family that could probably explain a lot of how God has been moving and working. And so this can be powerful as a listening device for those leaders around you. But I know, like I said, I'm going to be rushing through this stuff, but what I want you to do right now is, why don't you just out loud, what are some things that you noticed about your story? What stands out? Yep.
I was looking through the high points, and a lot of it had to do with independence.
Independence.
Either gaining independence or victories, kind of things. Like the birth of my children would be a victory.
Love it.
Moving out from bad situations would be a victory / independence, those sort of things.
Yeah.
For the hard times, it all seems to revolve around relationships. Like good friends dying, diagnoses, or things like that where it impacted relationships. So
Got it.
Kind of the theme that keeps going.
Yeah, that's good. And a lot of times with those different themes, they can almost be chapters in our lives, and you kind of see the different chapters of what you're experiencing. So really appreciate that. Yeah.
High points for me tend to be kind of achievements. I met a goal sort of thing. And then hard times, lack of control.
Okay.
So I can actually see where I kind of judge my life based on what I'm able to achieve, what I'm able to get, versus the things that have been kind of taken away from me.
All right. Welcome to therapy today, right? You guys didn't know we're going to be working through this stuff. Good. I love it. Anyone else? Any other themes? Yes?
Every time I thought about hard time, like, for example, we were infertile. And it was a high point because we adopted 3 kids. That
Wow.
was wonderful. Or hard time, my husband, we're happily in Casco Mountains in New York. My husband took a call to Nebraska, which I never heard of. So it's like hard time, but it turned out to be
Shh. They'll come after you. They'll come after you. Yeah.
You know, so it's like a lot of my hard times I turned into the high points.
That's good. That's good. Anyone else?
My high points and hard times went together. My high points often dealt with relationships, and often relationships I didn't ask for but ended up being like super life transforming and stuff. And the hard times involve a lot of feeling alone and loneliness and lack of being in a relationship with somebody. So.
Got it. Wow. It's powerful. Anyone else? Any other themes? You gonna say something back there? No?
Well, I would just say that some of my hard times were relational too with people, but high times too. But sometimes in the hard times, it becomes, you get isolated. Like
Yep.
you cut yourself off from other people or God's word that encourages you. Don't let the circumstances of life, it doesn't change how I feel about you, but you get so isolated in that those hard times are hard times.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's great. That's really good. Yes.
So, just as aside, every year we've been married on our anniversary, we take each year and do a highlight that happened each year where we just celebrated an anniversary, so that was easy to do here. But I'll have to say that a lot of my hinge moments are around babies and kids. You know, 4 children, and now we have 6 grandchildren, and
Wow.
it's just feel real blessed.
That's awesome. That's cool.
And it's hard, after you've been married for so long, to think something about every single year without getting the photo album out. You know?
Yeah. So then the question is, too, with all these things, how does that align to the gospel? Because there's connections, right? If you think about that deep and hard of just where the hand of God is moving in those particular relationships or those circumstances. I was walking alongside a young leader through this, and he was like, the guy's like, I don't know how to present the gospel. Like, I'm not a church worker. Okay, right? And he started to break down his story about how his love was for football, partying, and his greatest mentor was his dad, and then his dad was diagnosed with cancer. It rocked his world and eventually passed away. And just to hear him articulate his story, but then align that with the goodness of God the Father, he's like, that makes sense. I feel more comfortable about sharing my story with God's story. And there was that moment where everyone was just crying just because it's a beautiful thing. So there's so much that could be connected. I was always one of those people growing up. It's like, I don't really have much of a story. Pastor's kid, well, there's enough problems that it is. But, just I didn't have anything traumatizing that happened in my life. But really when I break this down and I really understand who I am and my story, I just see the hand of God moving through that. So again, that's just one interactive tool right there. All right. The next one, this one's pretty fun right here. I want to share this one with you all. Of course, my screen would do that. This is a tool that we use within for leadership training called People of Peace. All right, it's a reference in the book of Luke where Jesus commands his disciples to go and find people and places where there's peace. And where there is that peace, to be able to stay there in those homes and with those people. All right. And why this particular tool is really engaging, which is much different than what we just did, this really helps people take stock of their relational influence of those and other people around them, right? And what I mean by that is when you start thinking about who does God have you connected with? Sometimes that's a really loaded question because you're involved with so many different spheres of your life, right? But if we were to break this down a little bit and identify who a person of peace might be, and a person of peace is someone who likes you, likes being around you, when you guys gather together, it's there's some synergy. They want to be in your presence, or maybe they just never want to leave you alone, but they would do anything for you. Think of some of those people within your communities, the leaders within your churches. Who might those people of peace be for you? And also, how do you break that down in the different spheres of influence that you already have in these places? So the first place that we would say, who are the people of peace in your home, within your family? Who are those people? And these people can also be Christians and non-Christians, right? They don't necessarily have to be someone that is a believer, all right? And I'll give some examples for that in just a second, all right? And so start in your home life, who might be the people of peace? So aunts, uncles, mom, dad, kids, grandkids, right? Where you feel like if we are together, Jesus is going to do something extraordinary through this relationship. All right? So that's the first area. The second area would be your neighbors, your particular people that might be on your street. All right? So for us, I shared with you, we live in East Nashville. It's very it's gentrified, and there's a lot of division. In fact, my next door neighbor who's been living there for 40 years, his name is Mr. Henderson and Miss Jackie. And he always looks at me, he's like, well, Phil, 5 years ago, I would have been shocked to see any white girl just jogging down the street because that would be the most dangerous thing for her to do. And now we're at a place where I'm calling up my buddies and friends and everyone's walking their dogs. The whole street has changed, right? And the thing is, what's really interesting is, we've learned the people of peace in our life are Miss Jackie and Mr. Henderson, and when we first started doing happy hours on our street, they were the gatekeepers to make sure even the neighbors who've been there for the past 40 years were helping unify our street. For me and Carrie, we just wanted the name of Jesus to be known, and so we were identifying people of peace on our street, and one of those people were Miss Jackie and Mr. Henderson. So who are the neighbors on your street, within your neighborhood? Maybe it's the guy that you always wave at him as he's mowing the lawn, but you don't really talk to him as much, but you kind of have that general conversation. Or as you're walking your dog, maybe you know the dog's name, but you don't know your neighbor's name. But it seems like there's some sort of synergy and social interaction that's happening there. Who might those people of peace be? The next one, your school. This may be the place that you work. as a teacher, an administrator, or where you send your kids. Kiri and I, we did college ministry down in South Florida before, and we were trying to find people of peace at the school. Again, they could be Christian or non-Christian. We had no people part of our college ministry, but we were going to all the social clubs and hangout groups just to meet students. And oddly enough, Kyrie went to this particular group where there was salsa dancing that was happening, right? And this particular girl was gravitated towards Kyrie. She wasn't a Christian. In fact, she was a stripper. And but what was really wild is we named her a person of peace because she liked hanging out with us. But then she led us to 8 or 9 other people that eventually would be our student leaders of our campus ministry. People that we were pouring into discipling. Now, she wasn't necessarily the person that we were, I can't tell you any transformative story that happened with her there, but I can tell you from her network, who she connected us with, she was a person of peace for us. So who might be that in your school setting? Hobbies, rec, what do you like to do for fun? When I was in South Florida, we liked playing adult kickball. That was fun. We found people of peace there, and we would have conversations with them at the breweries and the bars afterwards, talking about life. And it was honestly a way where people were invited into our church because they had a trusting relationship with us. Who are the people of peace in your church? They're there too, right? We don't want to forget about the people within our own church. Who are those people? Also, I remember one year someone made the suggestion to me. It's like, maybe you are connected with other religious organizations, so mosque, other religious groups that, maybe there's conversations that are happening where there could be more of a connection later on. So think about that. Who are the people of peace in your social media feeds? Who are you interacting with, or who do you not want to interact with? But who might those people be where you feel like, man, we would connect if we were in the same place together, and maybe we can build something, do something, or imagine something greater even in your social media. So social media is not always the worst thing ever, but there could be some positive outcomes. People of peace in your workplace. Who are those people? And then lastly, who are the people that you see at the coffee shops, in the random places, when you walk in the grocery store, wherever you normalize your living, wherever you're walking, wherever you're interacting, who might those people of peace be? So I want you now to be able to write some of those people of peace down. Again, this is also for you too. Who are the people of peace within your family? Number 1. Who are the people of peace within your neighborhood and community? Number 2. Who are the people of peace within your school? Whether you attend, whether you send your kids there, who might those people of peace be? Who are the people of peace that you do with your hobbies, your rec, things that you like to do? Your church, social media, work, and everywhere else. I want you guys to just write some of those things down for yourself. And again, it kind of stirs up the imagination of some of your leaders of saying, hey, I do have influence after all. I do have an impact with some of these people, whether they're Christian or they are not. So write some of those things down, and we're going to share collectively with the group. And I would love to hear what some of your thought process is with the People of Peace tool. Okay? Any questions? All right. Well, I'm here right away. Now, as you're writing some of these things down and still thinking about this, I know like the title for this presentation is about attenders and streamers, right? And what I would say to this too is these are things that we use from a digital standpoint, and these are also tools that you can do within your own workplace, your own, the leaders that you're engaging with. There's no wrong way of doing it. Obviously, it makes more sense when you and I would be at a coffee table and having some of these conversations and writing some of these things down. But with what we do currently with training young leaders, everything that we do is from a digital standpoint. So yes, it is hard to be able to retain engagement. You know, I know that's like, okay, what does that look like for my online engagement? Because we can sit here and talk about videos and what you're doing. I'm just saying these are some still practical tools that you can use within your church, within Zoom. In fact, like when my small group gets together for our church, sometimes there's going to be weeks that we're not going to be in person because it's going to be more beneficial for parents as they're putting kids down, and we're still walking through some of these tools. So I just want you to put that in the back of your mind as you're thinking through this. Like, we're giving you these tools and that can be used both and. So just letting you know with that. Let me hear some of your thoughts of people of peace. Any things that you noticed, anything that stood out, any questions you might have?
People of peace are not necessarily Christian.
They're not necessarily Christian. In fact, when it says impact and influence up there, we usually would say the people of peace who are non-Christian are people of peace of impact, right? As I was sharing that story with you all of the gal that we were walking alongside with, who was a stripper, and she did not believe in Jesus whatsoever. She was still a person of peace because she wanted to hang out with us, and she connected us with so many other people. It was amazing. She was quite the networker. And sometimes we forget about the non-Christians there, and we're so focused on, well, are they a believer or not? Are they a part of a local church? Would they might be a part of my local church? Whatever that might be. So you're right. They can be both. Yes?
This is like a what if, but
Yeah.
I can't think of people for every area. And some of my areas overlap.
Yeah.
So like my church and my work, same thing.
Yep.
So, and then I was like, got to number 4. I'm like, oh, I don't think I have a life. Because I don't have any place that I do like a hobby. I don't play
Yeah.
tennis and all that. So it's like, okay, well, I don't have people in every arena, so to speak, but does that matter, I guess is the question.
No, and it doesn't matter. And actually, you may leave this place in 5 minutes from now. I was like, oh, actually, I love crafting with so-and-so. Or I like, I don't know if it's...
I would love to do that.
Yeah, okay. Or maybe that's, you know, someone who is a person of peace that does that, and like, I need to get a hobby. So let's hang out. Let's do some of this together. And so, yeah, exactly. There could be some opportunities beyond that, and we just don't want you to limit, because oftentimes we think our crowds, our people are the people that we associate with in our churches, right? I would imagine that most of you in this room, that is your world, you know, your ministries of what you're doing, and I totally get that. And this is not necessarily saying like you need to change your life today. This is something also that you can use as you are shepherding other people and asking them questions to help them take stock of their relationships around them. Any other thoughts?
Just to kind of echo what she just said, I think the first time I saw this exercise, the big takeaway for me was like I need to get out more because all these things overlap and
Yeah.
I don't make enough time for non-Christians because I just hang out with the same 50 people that would
Yeah. So,
From seeing this tool the first time, I was like, I need to get it.
yeah. It can be a little bit convicting, but it's also, again, but I would also say you never know. Like, you probably have wider influence than you actually think that you do right now.
Helps. It's an eye opener too to what God's already doing. And just maybe are recognizing that when I'm at a little league game, those could be people with peace that I'm sitting next to on the bleachers or whatever.
Yeah, and the reality too is we can't do everything, right? But an important thing is to be a part of this little league team and to invest in those relationships there. And really, that may be your focus. That may be the place that you are spending most of your time and energy in investing in those relationships. And that's great. And we want to be able to celebrate that. Again, there could be some conviction, but in all reality, it's just trying to address that, yes, there are different areas of your life that you could probably invest even more so. So, Little Leagues baseball, let's continue to plant and be rooted in that area, invest in those relationships, and see what happens from there. Yes?
My wife and I were both very much introverts, and so doing these type of things, it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
But whenever we get a moment to latch on to someone, we're like a bulldog. We don't let them go. And in fact, we've got someone right now who's a Mormon.
Yeah.
And they're a part of our prayers, part of our life, part of how do we become part of their community, their neighbors here in terms of the way they feel, make us people of peace in their lives so that we become influencers in their lives. So for us, it's not reaching all 8 places, but whenever we do have opportunity, we are dedicated to that person.
Exactly. And oftentimes it's easy to forget about those relationships and say, oh, that relationship does matter. And again, we want our leaders, our people, if we're trying to get them more engaged and passionate about what it means to be a follower of Christ, it's about really pressing in and investing into them, knowing their story, right? And also knowing the people around them. Like, hey, all this stuff that we're doing, it matters, right? And so if you don't take stock of some of these things and realize where God might be at work, we might be missing out some of the moments. So this tool really kind of helps us re-engage and think about what that might mean for the people that we serve.
My friend and I decided in our neighborhoods to have accountability with each other because both Christians both want to reach our neighborhoods. So we're like, okay, what are we going to do? So we both came up with a plan, and then we're accountable to each other to carry out those plans, which really helped. She and her granddaughter made little bags with popcorn and stuff and just delivered them. And then we had a funeral in one of our neighbors, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. So then I invited all the women from our neighborhood to my house like next week for a coffee cake kind of coffee thing. So she's like, how you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm a little nervous. She's like, how you doing? So accountability among Christians to do those important things, I think, has really pushed me to do something I would have normally been more reticent to do.
Yeah. We as leaders can press into those things. How are those things going? You say that you're wanting to invest more in your neighborhood. Like, tell me about some of those things of what you're doing. And, it kind of gives us, I'm not trying to make this about goals or metrics, but like when we actually have something that we're working towards and we're asking these questions of our leaders, it becomes more than, I need you to volunteer helping out usher on Sunday or be a Sunday school teacher. It gives people more of that purpose of like, hey, this is where God has me, and I'm glad that you're asking these questions and you're investing in me in this way. Yeah.
Do you ever find when you're using this with young leaders, I'm thinking of one of my leaders in particular, but
Yeah.
that they have like 25 people for each category, and you're like, that's too many people, or we don't put a limit on the event?
Well, they could. You want people to write down as many names as they can,
Okay.
right? And when the time comes and say they're super extroverted, right? It's like, okay, you can't be all things to all people, but you got to start naming some people that you can really be intentional with that. So this is going to work for someone who's introverted, or someone who's extroverted. It's just a tool to think about this. And it's more than just young leaders. It's also us too. So any other thoughts, perspectives? All right, another tool. I promise you, we're working towards something right now, okay? We're getting there, all right? And that way we can start asking better questions at the end, all right? So there's people of peace, but there's also places of peace, all right? it's really important to not only identify the people, but like where the different coffee shops or the neighborhoods or the communities that we need to be placed into. And some questions, just to make it simple, and we're not going to work through this tool too much, is asking some of these things. Who brings out my best, right? Name the kind of person that brings out your best. Name the people that you know of that bring out your best, all right? To whom should I give my best, right? Who needs me, right? Sometimes we're wasting our time and energy in maybe the wrong places, right? And so to whom should I give my best, and name some of those people and those kinds of people. And then from the places, what place brings out my best, which is an important thing, all right? So Kiri and I really learned that we really like being in the city, right? That it is a place that is challenging. You know, it feels like the soil for people wanting to hear the gospel is really hard. But we like just learning from people's stories, and even if their backgrounds or sexuality or whoever they are is much different than us, we feel like that really we can be in those moments with those people, and usually typically that exists in a city environment more so than anything else. So we love living in a city. When we lived in open spaces, Nebraska, or any rural area, we're not going to be able to give our best. It doesn't bring out our best either. And so it's important to identify those things, because maybe if you need to make a career change or looking at a different call, it might be important to be able to not just also ask those questions of the congregation, the school, or wherever you serve, but also, is this a place where it's going to be beneficial for me and my family? And then what place needs my best? And just to be able to identify those kinds of places and those names of people, that is really going to help people start thinking, where do I need to focus my time and my energy towards? All right. I can give this one to you later, but it's just another thing that we do that kind of really connects well with the people of peace. Okay, you might be familiar. I'm sure everyone is familiar with some sort of inventory, gifting inventory, spiritual gifts, Myers-Briggs, Strength Finders, Enneagram, APES. We do Discovery Insights. Right now, I'm working through Working Genius. I don't know if anyone's done that. The thing is, and you all probably know this, like, you can't just use that one personality test to define who that person is, right? We know that we are way more complex, and we've been uniquely designed by God. But these things can serve as a tool to be able to really understand where one might be passionate about, like how they might be able to serve. So for instance, even for myself, I'm not a pastor, and at first I thought I was supposed to be a pastor. Why? Because my dad's a pastor, and all the blue-haired ladies were telling me that I should go to seminary and do that, right? And one of the big breakaways that I learned was, when I were to look at my APES, which is one, is anyone familiar with APES? Done that before? Okay, a few people. This is apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, teacher. Right? Typically, you have a lot of pastors. Well, I shouldn't say typically. They train to have men and women to be shepherd teachers, right? And I am not a shepherd teacher whatsoever. In fact, like, if I were to be at your church on a Sunday and just break down a particular text, like, I'm not going to be able to give my best towards that. I mean, that's just not who I am. But if it's starting something new, something that's very entrepreneurial from an apostolic perspective, with an evangelist heart, like, that's who I am. And so when I was finally able to understand those things, I had a better understanding. It's like, okay, I'm not called to be a pastor. Do I love the church? Do I want to serve the church? No, this is what I'm gifted at. So all these things can be very helpful. Whether you use your Enneagram, whatever you want to be able to use. Like, it's important as we walk through our leaders that we have some sort of assessment, so that way you can generate more conversations more and more, right? I'm more and more convinced that people they really want to know more about themselves. We have so many young leaders that their big thing is just discovering their identity. And, obviously it points to Christ, but they really want to know what they're good at, right? They really want to know what they're passionate about, what they're gifted towards. These things can serve as tools. Ultimately, we can take all these different tools and all these different things, their interests, what you're excited, what drives you, what you have a burden for, and from there, if we're walking alongside people and we're increasing engagement, we're going to be able to articulate some of their values, their hopes, what are some of the lies that they've been listening to better understand what they might be passionate about. And so, again, another tool that we would be able to use to really break that down to get to what they might be. So, what do I mean by all this, right? Let me get back to this in a second. Whoa! Forgot a slide. Okay. I'm going to come back to this in a second. Let me just share some stories, and of course, that person is not on there. It's all right. So when we were breaking this down for someone, we have a 1,000 Young Leader participant that joined who is a NASCAR driver. All right. And he was just like, I'm not going to be doing ministry. Anyone familiar with NASCAR, like how it all works? Okay, cool. You guys, when I say like park and stop, do you know what that means? I had no idea what that meant. So I'm glad you know. Basically, he'll race on NBC, ESPN, all that stuff. But he's not like one of the big time racers, because usually if you're in NASCAR, you have a lot of money and you know a lot of people, and then that's how you get to be able to race. So it's really who you know sometimes. And some of the most skilled people are actually not racing on the weekends. And so his dad was a NASCAR driver. He kind of made it so far. The car made it to the Hall of Fame, but like he's trying to break in there, but no one really wanted to give him the money. So what he does is he races for some owners, and he qualifies for the races, and then he parks the car, and then he gets a small paycheck, and then races the next week. That wasn't paying the bills for him. So where he really started to take off in his career was he does online streaming through Twitch. So he's playing video games online. He has sponsors. Again, another world that I don't live in, right? It's funny. Like, then they say that like kids now want to be influencers, while kids in China want to be astronauts. So there you go. Education, right? Anyways, he's an influencer. He has sponsors. That's just what he does. And he's like, how can I use all these things that we talked about and create gospel opportunities, gospel conversations? Well, he decided that he wanted to be able to create his stream and invite people into another Zoom room if people want to hear more conversations about his faith. He started talking about his faith in his live broadcast. And he probably would Twitch to about 7,000 people a day, like watching him live all at once. And so he's just sharing these things like, hey, this is what I believe about God, and this is what I've learned more, being part of a church, this is what matters. And taking all these different things and then inviting people into that. Well, that's his passion, right? Is racing, very entrepreneurial. His context, he's a NASCAR driver that can't really race on every weekend. So his context is he's going to try to do whatever he can to make money by streaming online because people will follow him that way. That's just what he does. So I don't really want him to reinvent the wheel and do something completely different. We want to celebrate these things, his spiritual gifts, his people peace, and create a gospel opportunity for him by creating another Zoom room and inviting people in. And that's how he has been sharing the gospel with people, all right? Imagine if we start understanding some of our leaders a little bit more and pressing into the things that they are passionate about. Because it turns out they probably don't want to volunteer by getting coffee ready every Sunday morning. Imagine if we actually start asking some of these questions, what that might look like. We had another guy who joined 1,000 Young Leaders. He's like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. Typical millennial, right? We don't know anything, right? And he's like, what I do love to do is volunteer at this homeless shelter every Saturday, and I really love making pizza. My wife hates it because I'm making pizza all the time, but I really love making pizza. Going through all this different stuff. You know, he has a job, he does graphic design, but he's just not fulfilled and everything. Well, as he was learning more and more about himself and pressing into some of these things and asking these questions, he's like, why can't I open up my own pizza business and employ homeless men? And that can be a form of discipleship. So he's doing that in Cleveland, Ohio. All right? That's it. That's really cool. We're pressing into the things that people are passionate about. Another guy who joined 1,000 Young Leaders, he's going through residency as a doctor right now, and he got his MBA. It's a freak of nature, right? Like, I get intimidated if I walk onto a huddle with him because he's just like, I'm here and he's all the way up here, right? And the thing is, what he wants to be able to do is, you know, take all these things that he's doing, and he wants to create a residency program in 3 different third world countries, right? To help, because if healthcare is so bad in Haiti and some of these other places, why can't we have more of a robust system of training up other doctors and leaders? And how can we infuse that with discipling questions for the people? So that's where he's wired. I mean, he gave me his org chart. You know, he's got like 2,000 people in his org chart. I'm like, who are you, right? Like, I just don't think that way. And the thing is, but that's just what he's passionate about. That is what his context is, right? Another gal, she's like, I'm a stay-at-home mom. What am I going to be able to do? Well, she realized that she had a lot of network in the Chicagoland area, and she would meet moms in the park, right? Well, that turned into giving parenting tips and infusing that with the gospel with other moms in the park, right? And now she is, she's doing that. The kids all get together. It's this beautiful thing. Now her church is creating a job description so that way she could be more in the community. And they're paying her, I think she's like 15 hours a week to like replicate what she's doing. Imagine if we start pressing into our leaders and like really understanding their stories, their people of peace, their passions, their hobbies. It's not easy. It takes time. But I wonder if that is going to really increase some of the engagement of how we do streaming, how we do worship, how we connect with people. And so what I'm talking about at the very beginning is like, I want you to start rethinking what that looks like from a teaching center to a training center. How do we start having some of those conversations with our leaders of creating that training mentality alongside with what we do on a weekly basis? Are you going to ask something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I love what you're saying, and I understand the 1,000 Young Leader model.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think we could do this in a church where, I mean, you're dealing with 1,000 Young Leaders, you're dealing with them for whatever, a 6-month commitment on a weekly basis. How do we take that kind of structure into the congregation?
Well, as a leader, this is not going to just be this immediate change where everyone is going to sign up for this particular training within your church. The question is, like, who are the 1 or 2 people that you can start sitting down on a more regular basis and working through some of these discipleship tools? And starting small and investing, maybe just say, we're going to be doing this for a year and asking some of these questions, because it takes a good amount of time to be able to work through that. And, you know, maybe that's not going to show up on the scorecard for the elders meeting, you know, what they want you to be able to do. But if we don't take time to press into even 2 of those leaders within our congregation, like, it's going to be hard to reproduce anything, and eventually it'll be really hard to multiply anything as well. So, yes.